Rams house. Welcome into a brand new episode of the Rams Report by Chat Sports. Today, our focus is who's up next. Specifically, who's up next at the offensive coordinator spot. Obviously, Mike LaFleur steps out to become the next head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, leaving us with, as is kind of becoming traditional for this football team, a vacancy at offensive coordinator. An important position to fill, absolutely, on this staff. The second most important thing on this offensive staff behind Sean McVay himself as head coach and primary play caller. And let's just be clear about one thing that isn't changing. Despite all of the myriad changes we've gone through on the offensive coordinator spot over the last couple of seasons, one thing has been consistent and will continue to be consistent. Sean McVay is the play caller. None of the guys that have cycled through, as many of them as have gone on to be head coaches and great play callers on their own new teams, Kevin O'Connell, Liam Cohen, none of those guys called plays in Los Angeles. And the new guy coming in, whoever he is, even if it's an internal or external candidate, we're going to talk about both in today's video. He won't be calling plays either. It's still going to be Sean. Not too much is going to be changing from a fundamental scheme perspective. I just think that's important to note, important to clarify. But let's start talking candidates. And our first candidate is going to be external because note what Sean McVay said in the press conference he had after he got his contract extension. They're going to conduct an extensive search for the next offensive coordinator that will include both internal candidates and external candidates. So our candidates list today includes both, starting with Jake Peetz. Might be a familiar name to a lot of you guys for a couple reasons. Number one, he spent the last 2 seasons as Seattle's passing game coordinator, so you might have heard of him in that context. But if you've been a Rams fan for a couple of years now, you probably remember Peetz from the time he spent with us. So this would be a bit of a reunion. He spent 2022 to 2023 with us as an offensive assistant and also in the role of passing game assistant. So obviously always been on the offensive side, but he's got a lot of experience in the coaching realm. Start to look at his resume here. He's been coaching in football, at either the college football level or the NFL since 2006 and has 11 years of NFL specific experience with a number of different teams, including the Jags, I believe the Dolphins, obviously the Seahawks, and us. Obviously, he was with us, as I mentioned, from 2022 to 2023. Very close relationship with Cooper Kupp, was a big part of the reason why they were able to bring Cooper Kupp to Seattle, along with obviously his Washington ties in his personal life. And then super successful with the Seattle Seahawks over the last 2 seasons, especially this season with Sam Darnold, the resurgence in that offense. They led them to a top 10 passing offense overall. Got really good production out of Geno Smith when he was in Seattle as well, which looks much better when you consider how bad Geno was in Las Vegas this season. So Peetz would be, in a lot of ways, a really good hire. You look at his resume, you look at the fact that he's very familiar with Los Angeles, a McVay guy in a lot of senses, being with him for 2 seasons. A lot of things sound great here, but there's one major hitch with Jake Peetz, in my opinion, and that's I just don't think he's actually going to be available. I think Peetz is probably going to get promoted to the offensive coordinator role in Seattle. I think they're going back and forth between him and their run game coordinator. And one of those guys is likely going to get the job because remember, Clint Kubiak, their current offensive coordinator, stepped out to take the head coaching role in Las Vegas. Seattle's kind of in the same situation we are in a lot of ways with LaFleur. So they're looking to replace their guy as well. Pete's definitely going to be high on the list of guys that get an interview for it. So he may not even become an option for us to interview in the first place, but definitely someone to consider if he does get passed over for that OC role. Somebody else. Alex Tanney. This is our second external candidate before we get into 2 internal candidates. And Tanney's come up in a lot of discussions that I've seen from other people about like who might be next up for the Rams. Obviously, there's one candidate who I know you guys are kind of waiting for. He's on this list, don't worry, who is the obvious front runner. But Tanny does make sense as an outsider guy. You look at his resume, he was a quarterback in the NFL from 2012 to 2020, mostly a backup, not really super notable in that sense, but 5 seasons as an NFL coach since coming out of that role, and he's been solid in his role as an NFL coach. Spent a couple seasons with the Eagles, which we'll get into, and then really successful this past year guiding the resurgence of Daniel Jones as passing game coordinator in Indianapolis. And you look at the time he spent in Philadelphia, though, and that's where I start to have a little bit of concerns. The production from Jalen Hurts isn't bad necessarily, but if you compare it to what he was able to do after Tanney left, he actually got significantly better. And that definitely causes me a little bit of pause. Why did Jalen Hurts struggle a little bit under Alex Tanney at the end of the day? I don't know. Again, he wasn't calling plays for Jalen Hurts, so it's tough to attribute that to him entirely. And without being able to interview him and ask the questions, tough to get an answer there. But I also struggled to entirely attribute the success of Daniel Jones this season to Alex Tanney. Again, not the play caller in Indianapolis this season. And something that he had for Daniel Jones to help make things really successful is one of the NFL's best run games behind Jonathan Taylor. And that, unfortunately, we've got a great run game in Los Angeles, but we don't have a Jonathan Taylor to help offensive play calling. So I would be questioned about Alex Tanney. I would be wondering whether or not that would be the greatest hire for Los Angeles. I think the best option is truly an internal guy who we're going to talk about in a minute, but I want to hear from you guys. Would you want to see the Rams go external for the offensive coordinator hire, or would you want to see them go internal? Type E in the comments for an external hire. Type I in the comments for an internal hire. And if you want to add after that who you think would be the best hire, feel free to do so. I'll be responding in the comments as I always am. Let's move on to our internal options. And here's the guy that I know. Everyone's been waiting for him. Nasty Nate Scheelhaase. Nasty Nate. He, our current passing game coordinator, this is my pick. If I'm making the hire, guys, I'm going with Nate Scheelhaase. I've made no secret about that. I've talked about Nate a lot on this channel, and I think it would be a very seamless transition to have him be promoted to offensive coordinator from passing game coordinator because the players love him. They've talked very highly of him. Matthew Stafford has talked very highly of him. I want you guys to check out this quote from Puka Nacua. And just about like how Nate connects the locker room. He says, I guess I'm new in the NFL too, but I feel he's the modern age coach of somebody who's a little bit familiar with some of the slang terms that we might use in the meeting rooms, like lit, slap, gang, or fire. Things that wouldn't make sense when we're watching football. He understands those. His ability to communicate what our job is on Wednesday through Sunday is something that I'd say has been a blessing in our room. And I just think that is exactly what we need. Someone who can be the right type of communicator to some of the younger guys on this team, can make that connection, but can also carry the torch a little bit. We don't need enormous change here. We need continuity. I don't really love the idea of going external because I feel like that brings change that this offense does not need. At the end of the day, we were the number one offense in the NFL last season. There's not a lot that you need to fix or change. And I like the idea of somebody at the end of the day that is very comfortable with Matthew Stafford and that Matthew Stafford is very comfortable with. And I think that's exactly what Nate is. This past season, Matthew Stafford's about to win the MVP. We're filming this on Wednesday. The NFL Honors is on Thursday. It hasn't happened yet, but if Matthew Stafford doesn't win the MVP, you guys are going to get a video on Thursday from me absolutely ranting because he deserves to win it. He absolutely does. We all know that as Rams fans who watch every single one of these games. And I think Nate plays a big role in why Stafford was as successful as he was this season. Not to take anything away from Stafford, but to props to Nate. I think a big part of his presence in the room, a big part of his connecting ability, I want to see him be the offensive coordinator. I want to see him get that role. The things that we've heard about him from head coaching interviews, if you've paid attention about the way he commands a room, about the charisma that this guy has, I think that he's more than ready to jump up to being an offensive coordinator. The only problem I have with Nate Scheelhaase is that we're probably just not going to get to keep him for very long because I do think that he's got a super bright future. I think he's a future head coach. And I think we'd just end up looking foolish in a couple years if we had this guy on our staff and we went with anybody else to be our offensive coordinator at the end of the day. But we will talk about one more candidate. And this is one of the other candidates. If you didn't go Nate, I would really hope that you went with him. Because there's a lot about Ragone, Dave Ragone, our current quarterback's coach, that is very similar to Nate Scheelhaase. I just can't speak to Ragone in the same ways that I can Nate in terms of like all the things that we've heard about Nate's ability to light up a room. But what Ragone has that Nate does is a little bit more experience. And Albert Breer threw Ragone out there. Maybe wouldn't have jumped to my mind first, but shout out to Breer here. Passing game coordinator Nathan Scheelhaase is one name that's certainly in the running, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility that quarterbacks coach Dave Ragone lands the job. He's been a coordinator before under Arthur Smith in Atlanta and is right there as a consideration for McVay, and it does make a lot of sense. Spent 5 seasons as an NFL quarterback, one of which was in 2006 with the Rams, tail end of his career. He was just on the practice squad before training, he went through training camp with us, but then got cut before the start of the regular season. But has since embarked on a career in coaching. And as Breer mentioned, he's got play calling experience. He would be coming over as, of all these options, only Peetz has been an offensive coordinator before, and not at the NFL level, but Ragone has been an OC at the NFL level with Atlanta. Wasn't super successful, but he's also been the quarterback coach for Matthew Stafford for the last 2 seasons. So I like it. Again, not as much as I like the idea of hiring Nate Scheelhaase. I think it's going to be hard for anything to talk me out of Scheelhaase being the guy. Just everything that I've heard from everyone who works as closely as they do with Nate Scheelhaase tells me if you don't go with him, you're probably making a mistake. But if you are going to make, I guess, a mistake, it would be Ragone to be the best possible mistake, if that makes sense. I think Ragone, if you're not going Scheelhaase, it's got to be him. But overall, if you take away one thing from this video, I want to see the Rams go internal. Because again, it's about continuity here, not change. At the end of the day, this isn't a situation where we need massive change. This is a situation where we need to keep things going the way they have been. But I want to hear from you guys, as I always do. This is Chat Sports, not Chat at You Sports. Jake Peetz, type JP if you want to go with Jake Peetz as the next offensive coordinator of the Rams. Type NS if you're rolling with me and with Nate Scheelhaase. Type AT if you want Alex Tanney from the Indianapolis Colts. Or type DR if you want Dave Ragone. 2 internal options, NS and DR, or 2 external options, JP and AT. Let me know in the comments who you're going with. As always, I will be in there responding and letting you guys know what I think as well. We appreciate you tuning in. If you made it to this point in the video, you are one of our real ones. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you guys in the next one.